bought a 1-star costume off Amazon for Hera Syndulla from Star Wars. I'm gonna be wearing this costume at a Millionaire's kid's birthday party in less than 2 weeks. So why would I buy such a cheap 1-star costume for such a high profile event? It was the only one that was gonna arrive in time. So I literally have to make this look good no matter what it looks like. The actual listing for the costume that I bought has only 1 review. It is 1 star and the person didn't write anything. So
who knows what this costume is going to look like.
But here's some reviews from other listings that literally look like the same product to me. Droke Angel said, the headpiece was laughable and needed a replacement. The pants fit terribly and needed adjustment. The jacket was legit, as was the top and headphones. Julie A said, good costume, but looks kind cheap material. I returned it because the material looked cheaper than I was expecting. Let's just unbox it and see what we have. Okay, my first impression is, what is this color? Like, this is not brown. This is goldenrod. I'll try them on, but not as expected. Julie, you are correct. All right, let's pull out the headpiece. Oh no. I can already tell, like, there is no structure to these Lekku. Oh no. They're just so floppy. You know what? Maybe they'll look great on. Also, wait. I know she said headphones, but clearly what she meant was the flight goggles. There are no flight goggles attached or in this bag. So I guess I just didn't receive them. It's definitely the same listing because look, it's here in the picture from the one that has the verified purchase. So I guess they didn't ship them. And there is no time to return this and get a new one because this took 2 weeks to get here. There was none on Prime. I think let's go try it all on, do a suit up, and see where we're at. I don't understand the pants. These are full on yellow, so I will not be using these pants. Plus they smell very chemically, like some sort of like formaldehyde situation. I don't want to know. And then this belt is really odd. It's too big for me, but the biggest problem is that the strap that goes around the thigh, it is not close. So this is like 4 inches too small and the belt around is 4 inches too big. So I don't know what body they were making this for. Really large waist and really skinny thighs. So this needs some adjustments. The jacket, I am pleasantly surprised by. I need to figure out how I'm gonna press it or steam it without melting this leather, but way better than I was expecting. Same with the shirt, but we're at the moment. The moment has arrived to try on the headdress. What do we think is the front here? Looks interchangeable to me, which is not a good sign. Having trouble even covering my wig cap, so that's one. Okay, so we got this hair just like sticking out back here. And yeah, this is a joke. So these will 100% be remade. We're gonna remake this whole upper piece and really transform this costume. So let's get to work. I bought this pattern for the Lekku on Etsy, which I will link to below. It calls for 5mm upholstery foam, which is about 1/5 of an inch. I didn't have this, so I weighed my options between 1/2 inch upholstery foam, sew-in foam stabilizer, these pieces of reticulated foam, which are actually fridge liners, or this extremely thin upholstery foam I already had, which is about 1/8 of an inch. What I decided to end up trying was doubling up the fridge liners and the thin upholstery foam by gluing them together. Okay, this is what I'm gonna try to go with. I used barge contact cement to glue the edges of the reticulated foam together, and then I used a spray adhesive to glue the large surfaces of the reticulated foam down to the upholstery foam, but honestly, I do not recommend this because it didn't end up sticking long term and I had to go back with the barge anyways. Once it was together, I cut out all of the pieces of the pattern and barged them together. Per the pattern, I filled about 5 to 6 inches of the bottom of the Lekku with rice. When I read this, I imagined it being a really large quantity of rice for some reason, but in reality, it was hardly any at all. This rice gives it a little bit of natural weight, but it doesn't make it heavy at all. When I used my hands to coax the rice all the way to the bottom of the Lekku, this part looked oddly inappropriate, so yeah, use your imagination. Next, I filled the remainder of the Lekku with polyfill. Probably the most confusing part of this pattern was attaching this piece that goes around the forehead, but Basically, it's smaller than the current circumference of the headpiece, so you just stretch it as you glue it, and this is what helps it stay tight on your head when you're wearing it, which is a very good design on the part of the pattern maker. With that, the foam base is done. Here is a movement test where I was seeing if the Lekku had some sway, which they did thanks to the rice. The flight cap pattern came in the same bundle with the Lekku pattern. I looked at all of my brown leather and pleather options and decided to use this thrifted leather skirt. And then I cut out all the pattern pieces. The pattern called for these decorative lines, so I marked where all of those lines would go on certain pattern pieces, and then I sewed all these lines on the machine. Next, I just followed the pattern and sewed the whole thing together. Then I put the finished flight cap onto the Lekku and tried it all on. At this point, everything was fitting great and I loved the way it was coming together. So I put this contact cement on the Lekku to kind of seal it. And then I've been testing out various second coats before I put on a PAX paint because I want to paint this to make it look as much like skin as possible. So I've tried out this Monster liquid latex. I've tried out Prozaid, and I've tried out this flexible acrylic primer. It's for foam. These two like don't do as much as I really would want them to do. And the liquid latex is definitely the best, but it gets really clumpy. And I've been trying to figure out forever like how to not make liquid latex clumpy. I did some research online and I wasn't really finding what I wanted. So then I realized, what if it's just this liquid latex? So this cost this much. So I was like, oh, maybe it's just cheap. So I bought 2 more brands of liquid latex and they cost this much. And look how small they are. So I think I might be onto something. So I prepared this piece of foam with the barge and I'm going to paint on all 3 different brands of latex. And we're gonna see if maybe it's just the problem with that type of latex, and then we can figure out the best brand of latex, because I think the ideal would be barge, liquid latex, and then PAX paint. And then I can paint these Lekkus. So let's test this latex. Okay, I let that dry overnight and either one of these is great. It was definitely a brand discrepancy. So now I'm gonna go in and do a full first coat all over these Lekku and let it dry, and then probably do a second coat, and then finally I'll be able to mix either 50% Prozaid and acrylic paint or 50% liquid latex and acrylic paint. So here we go with coating the liquid latex. Okay, well, that liquid latex covered half of the Lekku, just the front, only 1 coat. So I just went to a local costume rental place and I bought 2 clear latex. I think it works the same from what I could find online, at least for what I'm using it for, and 3 more liquid latex, so 5 of these total. And I shipped myself like 9 of them because I figure if I don't use it for this project, I'm gonna use it eventually. So I should now have enough for this project. And of course, I stopped and I got myself a little tweet. So now I'm on my way back home to finish this project. Let's go. These have dried overnight. They're a little sticky, but that's fine because they still are gonna get the paint job. But I love the texture that we got. Oh, so good. Very skin-like. Finally, time for PAX paint. I decided to use liquid latex instead of Prozaid to mix with the acrylic paint since it's cheaper, and I now had so much of it. With the base coat done, I sketched out the details of the Lekku and painted them on. I then had to get very creative on how I was going to paint the Lekku, so I used one of my standing Govee lights covered in plastic wrap as a stand. That way I was able to paint all of the angles of the Lekku and it would dry evenly without having to rest it on the table. To take the stickiness out of the dried PAX paint, I covered it all in a translucent setting powder. Baby powder works too. We even got a visit from Carla Pooch. Once done, I used a damp paper towel to wipe off the excess powder and the paint job is done. I put the hat back on the Lekku, which was like putting a diaper on a rotisserie chicken. It was a little bit of a struggle to get this on, but once I finally did, I tried it on and I literally do not know what happened. I could not get this on my head. I cannot figure out what happened between this clip when it went on just fine and now, but it was not working. So I cut down the back of the cap and tried to figure out a way to make the cap wrap around the Lekku once they were already on my head. I have like 20 minutes of footage that basically looks like this. But I finally figured out a way to make it lay nicely with some folds and darts. I made all the adjustments to the hat, added Velcro, and now here's how the hat goes onto the Lekku. Time to start on the goggles. I bought a separate pattern for this and I was excited to see that the pattern called for Warbler. I have never worked with Warbler and I have been waiting for an excuse to try it out. But first, much more cutting and gluing. This pattern was pretty intricate as it turned out, but the maker did a really good job. Another thing I had never tried before these goggles was sanding down EVA foam with a Dremel. This was super messy, but fun technique, and I will definitely be using it in future projects. Okay, time for the Warbler. So as it turns out, you just use a heat gun to heat up the Warbler, which here the pattern calls for doubling up the Warbler to make it thicker, and it just sticks to itself once it's heated. This product is really cool, and it's easy to work with. You just shape it with your hands and hold it in position until it cools. This is the piece for the bridge of the nose, and for intricate shapes like this, I do think Warbler is the ideal product to use because nothing else I can think of is as easy to bend into a unique shape and stays that quickly and easily. Here are the finished Warbler pieces in action. I used a scrap of the reticulated foam I had just lying around to give the goggles some nice texture. Now for the lenses. I decided to make these out of 3mm EVA foam and then cover them with a spray adhesive and a plastic transparency, just like I did when I was making the stained glass panels of the Evil Queen's crown. I'm gonna add a card to that video if you haven't checked it out yet. Okay, for the rest of the costume. I did my best to steam out the jacket without melting it. The best way to do this is to turn it inside out. It does take a lot of steam and a lot of patience to do it this way, and it's still not perfect, but it definitely is better. I completely replaced the pants because no. I altered the lengths of the belt to fit properly and stuck some EVA foam in this holster to give it some shape. I didn't want to have to paint my hands green, and with these fingerless gloves I would have had to, so I went ahead and bought full finger brown gloves just to avoid this. But even though I opted to not paint my hands, I still had to do a full green makeover on myself. The last step is making these goggles attached to the flight cap. So I marked with chalk where I wanted them to sit and then attached Velcro. It's done. I'll see you in the final result. It is done. Obviously, as you can see in this final result, the actual event turned out beautiful. They had so much at this event. It was so impressive. They even had a little Lego building station, and I made myself. So cute. I had so much fun at this. Anyways, happy it went well and happy with how she turned out. Here are a couple things though. The patterns were all super impressive, so check out the makers of the patterns in the description below. The one group I had with the goggles pattern, I loved exploring Warbler, but I don't know why they called for Warbler for as many pieces as they did. If you buy this pattern and make these, my recommendation is to just use Warbler for this nose bridge piece and these connector pieces. But a lot of these back pieces, this piece, they're all called for Warbler, and Warbler's really expensive. You don't need to make anything out of Warbler unless you're actually molding and shaping it. You can make it out of EVA foam. You can make it out of hard plastic, like one of these lids for a Tupperware container. Much cheaper than Warbler. So that's just one thing I wanted to point out to save you a little bit of money. The other thing I kind of wish about the Lekku, I'm really happy with my decision to go liquid latex painting instead of fabric. But because I did that, it made them a little bit more rigid, and they have no more like swing and sway like they did when it was just the foam. So that's kind of sad. I really wish they had that movement, but oh well. Overall, I am very proud of how she turned out. This was really fun. In terms of this original 1-star costume, would I give it a 1 star? No, I'd probably give it 2. I think that actually the reviews that I read you were pretty accurate. Low quality materials, horrible headpiece. I didn't even receive the goggles, and the pants were such a laughable color. But I do think that the jacket is pretty good. I will continue to use that, but would I recommend you buy it? No. Because honestly, you're remaking so much of it. There just wasn't enough for me to be able to turn over and make better with a few simple adjustments. It was pretty bad. But let me know how many stars you would give my new version of the costume in the comments. I'm interested to hear. But my next project, it's going to be a sewing project. I'm going to be making a cosplay for one of my all-time favorite Disney characters, and one that we hardly ever see cosplayers making for good reason, because there's not too much demand for her. So I'm super excited to have the opportunity to finally make her. So make sure to subscribe. Stay tuned for that video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.